Okay. Let's empezar. We'll probably have a few people joining us a little bit in session. Just so you know, there'll be a few people dinging in a little bit late. That's okay. Buenos días, buenos días.
Yes.
Casi llovió. It almost rained here yesterday. I don't know about you guys, it almost rained. And I say almost because I could feel that mist. What do they call that? There's a technical term for that.
Oh,
Virgo.
Virgo.
Something with a V. It's there's
Virgo.
the Virgo, maybe
Virgo.
the rain that is actually coming out of a cloud,
Right.
but does not hit the ground. So you will see no droplets on the ground, but you actually can feel it in the air. I had 20 seconds of that yesterday, but no more. So half a minute. Monsoon is maybe gonna come. Oh, that gives me hope. Okay. Yesterday was a cloudy day for us. Vamos a empezar. We're going to begin. Today's going to be all things imperfect. Marcos, gracias. Thank you, Mark, because you have a very good question. And that question is something that told me we need to do a walkthrough where I actually show the video and I comment, because his comments are all in Spanish, which are very easy for me to understand, but might be like, ooh, give somebody pause. Okay. I am going to start by just showing which page you may need to have handy for later. This page here with those, we did tener and estar, and the little dots are the things that we're going to work on, right? And then we're going to work on, you guys are going to work on ser and haber and ir eventually. So that page, whether you bring it up as a file from your screen or you printed it, whatever, you may want to rummage around and make sure you've got that handy. We'll work on that in, I don't know, I want to say maybe 20 minutes. But today, again, of course, is going to be revisiting. Past takes a long time to learn because it's such a complicated topic. Most of our session is going to focus on using the easy, only imperfect of these verbs because they're the first verbs. Okay. The first verbs you ever learn in Spanish are haber, because you learn it as I, ser, estar, tener, ir, all those easy things. Like, the am is our, the have, the go verbs that we use that are impossible to avoid in a normal 15-minute conversation between anybody, those common verbs. So most of our focus is going to be on those, and most of the focus is going to be on those in imperfecto. The one of the easier of the two past tenses to use. The imperfect is always the easier to conjugate because it is so consistent. It has so few irregulars. So most of our class will focus on that. However, before we do that, we're going to detour just a little bit into information about from the video, because we had a question on the video. And I'm going to start before we even start off on the questions so that because these words are going to become key. There are certain words, and this is not a definitive list. It is not an all-inclusive list. There are certain words that tend to be a signal, a red flag, to tell you we're going to use imperfecto, those aba, and ia endings, okay? It's because they are time marker words that indicate either description or something habitual, okay? So here are the time marker words that came later in the video. They were siempre, always, todos los, or todas las, okay? Meaning like every, well, todos is literally all, okay? But we have to use it if we say todos los días, todas las semanas, you know, whatever. Okay. Another time marker word was, ooh, and I've got to kind of get it. Oh, yeah, another time marker word, but a little more complicated one is cuando, which is when. And this will be used, you know, cuando era niño, cuando era niña, when I was a kid. And that is a time marker. That cuando is a very important one. Cuando can go off in different tangents, but cuando, when we talk about the past, you know, when I was a kid, when I was 20, when I was 15, because again, it's talking about, it's going to signal talking about something that was a habit or was a repeated action many, many times. Another time marking word he gave was cada vez que, cada vez que, and they defined that as whenever, cada vez que, literally, if you translate that, it's each time that. Yeah, cada means each or every, vez is time, cada vez que technically translates to each time that, but we would probably in English tend to say whenever. Okay, and the last time marker word is, I believe, mientras, sí, mientras. While. And this one is kind of an important one. Mientras, I'm going to put a bunch of stars on because mientras actually gets, is going to get some special attention because this is where we had a question come up. So these 5 time marker words came up in some of his examples, and we're going to do a little walkthrough of that video because we had questions from the video, and it will be easier for me to kind of illustrate if I walk through the example segment of the video, not the whole video. First part of the video, he gave all the endings for the imperfecto. We don't really need to go through that again. And the last half we looked at as the time marker words. So we're going to look at the middle section and do kind of a walkthrough, actually literally playing it and seeing what it means so we can explain questions. These time marker words are going to often get inserted into the examples in the middle part of the video. So that's why we're reviewing that these kind of time markers will indicate imperfecto. Okay, the problem we have is sometimes sometimes we need to use imperfecto, and we may plug in that second past tense as well. We're going to have to get very comfortable doing an uncomfortable thing, and that is using both imperfecto and what they call preterito, the preterite. Okay, some explanations, sometimes when people relate information about the past, they have to mix these 2 tenses, use half of the action in imperfecto and the other half in preterito. And this is where these questions tend to come up. And this is where sometimes these signal words may signal something that will be you know, a helpful cue for why we use one tense instead of the other. Okay. Bien, vamos a ver. Let's jump to the example sections, and I'm going to put my share screen on so that we can hear. Ooh, I plugged in the wrong screen. Let's plug in the correct screen. Here we go. Vamos a ver. Okay, I'm going to play this and then stop where we need it.
Y el tercer ejemplo.
And we have to wait just a little bit.
Nosotros vivíamos. De acuerdo. Ahora veamos las situaciones
Okay, so now let's see situations
en las que utilizamos
where we
el pretérito
use
imperfecto. Número 1. Acciones en el pasado que sucedían repetidas veces.
Okay, so here is a time when we use imperfecto. Activities or actions that happened repeated times. And notice he used suceder means to happen. It's one of the verbs that means to happen, to occur. He even uses sucedían in imperfecto, sucedían. Actions that happened repeated times. So actions that happened a lot, but you're not saying twice I did this. Twice is very defined. It means 2 times and over. Even saying something happened 3 times would be very defined and over. That would have to go into preterito. But if something happened a lot, and we're not really focusing on how often because it just happened a lot, and I don't know how many times, that means repetition. And repetition without definite knowledge of how often, just a lot, requires imperfecto. So let's look at the example.
Haciendo énfasis en la repetición de la acción
We're emphasizing
dentro de un marco
the repetition of the action, not how often really specifically, but just often.
temporal o periodo de tiempo. Lo sé, es un poco confuso.
I know it's confusing, and
pero
it is.
Veamos algunos ejemplos. Desde que salía el
Okay, let's look at this. Desde que salía el sol hasta que oscurecía, jugábamos videojuegos. And this is all straight descriptive repetition. We don't know how often, just all the time in this situation. From the time that the sun came up, salía, until it got dark, that's all description. Jugábamos videojuegos, we played video games. So what the person is saying is that all day long, while the sun, from the time the sun came up to the time the sun went down, we used to play video games. And that just says we did it a lot and we did it repeated times. So the sun coming up and it getting dark are description in the past, imperfecto, but the jugábamos is we used to play. We might be easily able to plug in the idea of we would play or we used to play video games. And that is why that is all imperfecto. Okay, I'm going to let it roll. So we're not focusing on we did this and it ended. We're not saying we stopped at 8 o'clock at night or we stopped at 9 o'clock at night. We were just saying all day long we were doing this. So the person speaking to signal that it was all day long event a bunch of times will purposely use imperfecto to signal this was going on. If the idea we want to convey would use in English was happening, we need imperfecto. That's what fits in this case.
Desde que terminaba de cenar hasta que dormía, veía películas en Netflix.
Okay, and here we don't have any time marker words yet. We don't have those helpful words yet. From the time I finished dinner until I went to sleep, we're describing a timeline. It's description. Veía películas. I would watch movies. I was watching movies. Veía. So terminaba, dormía, veía. In the first two, terminaba and dormía, I'm describing a habitual timeline. I'm not saying at 10 p.m. I'm not saying, I'm not like designating a specific hour. I am describing that timeline as a habitual thing. From the time I finished dinner till I fell asleep, till I went to bed. Veía, I would watch. I used to watch. We're talking about a habit. When the person uses imperfecto in here, he or she is signaling that it's a repeated event. That's
Como
why they
vemos,
use that.
aquí hablamos de algo que hicimos en el pasado,
Something we did in the past.
enfatizando la idea de que era una acción que se repetía en varias
So
ocasiones.
the person uses imperfecto because they're signaling to you this happened over and over again as a habit. Okay. Once you get used to it, the nice thing about listening to somebody talk using both imperfecto and preterito is the speaker will use imperfecto and immediately creates a picture in your head of this happened over and over. This happened a lot. Or that they're talking about a description. And when they use preterito, the other one you haven't really learned yet, they're signaling over and done with. Over and done with, okay? So it'll feel a little uncomfortable at first, but we're getting our feet wet.
Mencionamos el periodo de tiempo en el cual hacíamos esta acción.
So the description there is kind of more just marking the time as here was the timeline when I used to do this. And that's why it's all in imperfecto. Now we're going to see something different.
Número 2. Cuando hablamos de dos
when we talk about two actions,
ocurrieron al
when we talk about two actions that occurred at the same time, it's a little different.
mismo tiempo en el pasado. Veamos un par de ejemplos. Anoche, mientras cocinaba, veía una película.
And here, one of our time marker words does start to raise its head. It raises its ugly head and said, oh no, now I got to learn how to do this. Mientras now is going to signal while. And it's going to talk about two actions that happened in the past, but they were going on simultaneously. They were both going on at the same time. Okay? Because of this word mientras. Anoche mientras cocinaba, veía una película. Last night, while I was cooking, I was watching a movie. I was doing these two actions of cooking and watching a movie at the same time. And I use imperfecto for the two to say simultaneous. I'm doing them both at the same time. One is not interrupting the other. I'm doing them. I am multitasking. I'm doing them both at the same time. So I'm going to put them both in imperfecto because they're both happening in sync. Okay. While I was here's the idea. They translate this as while I cooked, but really what it means is last night, anoche, while I was cooking, I was watching. If the idea you mean in English is I was doing this and I was also doing this, we need imperfecto for the two. One action is not interrupting the other. They're both going on at the same time. Does that make sense? ¿Sí? ¿Entienden? Somebody uses imperfecto for two actions if they're happening simultaneously, real time, in the past, at the same time. Okay, let's let it roll.
Trabajaba en la computadora mientras escuchaba música.
Okay. I was working on the computer while I was listening to music. I was doing the two things at the same time. And if somebody means I was doing them in sync in the past at the same time, they will plug in imperfecto for both of those actions. I was working on the computer while I was listening to music, okay? Mientras, while I was doing this, mientras is always going to signal the imperfecto. But trabajaba is also imperfecto because I'm doing these two actions in the same time period. Okay.
Es decir, que estábamos haciendo las dos cosas
Simultaneously is the key.
simultáneamente, al mismo tiempo. Situación número 3, al hablar de una acción que es interrumpida por otra.
And here is the clue. If I have two actions in the past, they might be going on simultaneously, multitasking at the same time, in which case they'll both be imperfecto. But if what the speaker means is that one thing was happening imperfecto, and a second action interrupted, that second verb will flip out of imperfecto and go into what they call preterito. We'll go into the over and done with past tense. Now, well, we'll let him show the example.
La cual se expresa, se dice en el pretérito indefinido. Veamos algunos ejemplos. Mientras lavaba los platos, llegó mi esposa del trabajo.
Okay. Mientras, while, and here while is going to signal imperfecto. While signals it was happening in the background. It was going on for a long time. Mientras lavaba los platos. And look, the translation at the bottom says, while I washed the plates. But really what it is saying was while I was washing the plates. The idea really is while I was doing, and if what you mean is I was doing this, it was happening in the background. Now we've got an interrupting action, and the interrupting action cannot be an imperfecto, because this interrupting action is going to be something that happens, washing dishes, washing dishes, washing dishes, boom, it happens right in the middle of something that was already going on. The thing that interrupts has to flip out of imperfecto because it's indicating something that happened in the middle of something else that was already going on. So it flips into what we call the preterito, the once and done, the once and over action. While I was washing the dishes, my wife came home, my wife arrived, and now we need preterito. You haven't learned that yet, but llegó is not llego. Llego es presente. Llego with no accent on the o is I'm doing it right now, but llegó with an o on the end and an accent on the end means she did it or he did it. So my wife came in, my wife arrived, my wife came home from work. Okay.
Mientras caminaba.
And here was where we had this. Mientras caminábamos en Nueva York. Why? And it defines it at the bottom while we walked. But I want you to think not we walked, while we were walking along. That's how I want you to think about caminábamos. What it really means is while we were walking along, and we were walking for a long time. We were walking, we were walking, we were walking, we were walking. And in the middle of the walk, sometime in the middle of this long walk, we found money. Encontramos dinero en la calle. Encontramos switches into preterito. The question became, wait a minute, isn't encontramos presente? Well, encontramos can be presente, but AR verbs, oddly, for the we form, use this exact same conjugation for we only in preterito. So encontramos can mean both we find something right now or we found. It can be preterite. The we form, the nosotros form, in preterito also uses amos, just like it did in presente. So you may think, oh, that's confusing. Encontramos means both we are doing it now and we did it and it's over with. Yes. And you get that from context. You get it from context. The context is while we were walking along in New York, mientras caminábamos en Nueva York, while we were doing this over and over for a long time, oh, suddenly we look down and there's money on the street. There's money on the sidewalk. Encontramos dinero en la calle signals wow, a sudden discovery. And the sudden discovery is an event. It interrupted the long walk that was going on for a long time before we looked down and holy cow, look, there's a $20 bill on the sidewalk. Okay.
So Marilyn, the other part of my question was it just a typo then in the caminábamos?
Caminábamos?
Yeah.
Caminábamos means we were doing it, we were walking and walking and walking and walking. All of a sudden, something happened in the middle of that long walk.
Right, but if you go back, you can go back to
No, I'm not turning.
that screenshot on that video. Is it just it's a typo in that word? That too many
Oh,
B's.
yeah, there is a typo. Caminábamos. Yes, they're
Okay,
missing an N. Caminaba. They're missing a syllable. It should be caminábamos. Okay, let me go back to how that should look. I'm going to pull up a different screen to show you. You're right. They had a typo. So let me show you how caminábamos should have looked. You know, the best of us have typos. And you know, I didn't even it didn't even register because my brain heard it and didn't look at the typing. This is a descriptive thing. Caminábamos. We were taking a walk. Mientras caminábamos, while we were walking along. Caminábamos. Here is the syllable that you're right. It's a typo. Here's that was omitted. Caminábamos. Okay, bien. Does that make sense now?
Yep.
Mientras caminamos, but the encontramos is right. And encontramos, amos is an ending both for presente and for preterito. We'll deal with that another day. But that answers your burning question. Yes, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay. Magnifico. Let's go through his examples and then we'll move on to some practice. Okay. Está bien? Because it occurred to me that some of these examples might be helpful. The way they translate it is not exactly the way I would translate it. If you think of it in English as was doing something or used to do something, it will be more helpful than translating it as while we walked. It's more helpful for you guys right now at your stage to think of this as while we were walking. Okay. If what you mean is we were doing this, you need caminábamos and there's an extra B that doesn't need to be in there. So you're right. It's a big bad typo. Okay. Let's let it roll.
En Nueva York encontramos dinero en la calle. Como vemos, una acción interrumpe a otra.
So here is where imperfecto and preterito, the preterite, the event-oriented, done with it tense, will both maybe happen in the same sentence. Okay. People switch between imperfecto, the used to or was doing it, and the event-oriented past tense all the time. And we're not even focusing on the event-oriented one yet. Okay. We're focusing more on the used to or was doing something, the imperfecto, okay, because it's easier to use. But do know that people will insert those two tenses in the same sentence or moving from one sentence to another all the time, because they're signaling different kind of actions. They're signaling an over and over and over again, or a description, and then juxtaposing that with here comes an event to interrupt. Here comes an event to interrupt. And this happens all the time. And it is very, very uncomfortable when you're first learning Spanish. It's super uncomfortable. So if you think, oh, I'm weird, I find this hard. No, 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 you are not weird. Yes, it is hard for people first learning it. And it takes a very long time of seeing lots and lots of examples to get used to it. So be comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit. Let's get a few more
¿Qué estaba
descriptions.
sucediendo? Una acción se detiene e inicia una nueva acción. Situación número 4. Cuando hablamos de describir a una persona, un paisaje.
When we talk about describing a person, the countryside, the landscape, whatever is in the environment around you, the weather, whenever we go into descriptions, flat out description in the past.
El clima, etc. En el pasado, por supuesto. Para esto, es importante saber que el verbo ser es irregular y en el pretérito imperfecto se conjuga de esta manera.
Okay, so these are going to happen a lot. Also, estar will happen a lot, but these are the forms of ser. Era, eras, era, éramos. And, oh, they got another typo because that E should have an X mark. Éramos, eran. These, any verb that talks about a description in the past will have to flip into imperfecto. It must use imperfecto. Whether we're describing a thing, things in your environment, a human being, or the weather, or even talking about the time, talking about age, anything that is description in the past must be
Veamos varios
imperfecto.
ejemplos. Ella era muy extrovertida en la universidad.
She was very outgoing, extroverted, literally. She was very outgoing in college. Era muy extrovertida.
El cielo estaba muy nublado ayer por la tarde.
The sky was cloudy. Okay, was cloudy, estaba muy nublado. These descriptive verbs that we tend to use a lot in our first experience, the first days with Spanish, of ser and estar and even tener and haber, will have to go into imperfecto.
Nuestros vecinos estaban muy felices cuando
And here's description. Estaban muy felices. They were very happy cuando compraron su casa, when they bought their house. And that bought their house is an event that was over with. So it goes into the past tense you don't know yet, what they call preterito. When they bought their house, and that was an event, but they were happy. How they used to feel, okay? And how they were feeling is a description. So that flips into imperfecto. Estaban muy felices. They were very happy.
su casa. Situación número 5. Cuando hablamos de características en general. Veamos algunos
We talk about
ejemplos.
general
La
characteristics.
casa que pinté era verde. Estos
Okay. Let's look at that a little bit. This one's a little more complicated, so we won't focus as much on this. The house that I painted, and I painted it as an event, but it was green. If you say something was green, it's a description, boom, over with, imperfecto, done, case closed. Anything that is description and green is a description. It was green. Was green must use imperfecto, era verde. The fact that I painted it was an event, but that it was green is a description. It was green. How long was it green? If the how long reaction is, I don't know, it's imperfecto. It just was green. Anything that's description in the past is imperfecto.
Era verde. Esto significa que en el pasado era verde y ahora es de otro.
Yeah, now it may be another color. It may be faded. It may have been changed, into a different color entirely, but it used to be green. Oh, was doing something, they were doing something, or used to be. When you describe something in the past, you're saying it used to be. It used to be green. It used to be brown. It used to be red, right? It's imperfecto, used to be.
Color. En mi antiguo trabajo, los vasos para tomar agua eran de papel.
Oh, okay. Let's take a look at that. What a long sentence. In my old job, antiguo trabajo looks like antique job. It means a former job, a job you no longer have anymore. Antiguo there means old job, as in don't do that job anymore. En mi antiguo trabajo, in my old job, in my former job, los vasos para tomar agua, the drinking glasses, the glasses for drinking water, eran de papel. They were made out of paper. They used to be made out of paper. That's a description. You're not saying that they put it in a ceramic jug, okay? You're saying they were, or not in styrofoam, they were paper, okay? They were cups made out of paper. Eran de papel is description. So description in the past has to be 100% imperfecto.
Los vasos para tomar agua eran de papel. Así que, en general, cuando describamos las características de algo o de alguien en el pasado, usaremos el imperfecto.
So,
ahora, para que todo esto sea aún más fácil,
and I think he goes into the time words here. Yeah. All right. So now the reason for doing the walkthrough on that is this. The reason is the only way to get comfortable with this very uncomfortable skill. It is super uncomfortable. The only way to get comfortable with it is to see lots of examples over and over again. And in some cases, we'll have to explain what those uses are. The storytelling helps because you start to see how they're mixing these things. And it's not super important that you know how to conjugate that event preterite, what they call preterito preterite tense yet. I want you to get used to conjugating just the imperfecto first because it's easy, because it's descriptive, because you can use it in more limited situations. I will not ask you personally to use the two tenses together yet, but it is useful for you to hear and see short stories that start to blend them. So you start to get used to, here's where they're going to mix. They're going to bleed into each other. And it is literally, unless you work really hard, which is what we're doing today, to isolate it. Today we're isolating and just going to use imperfecto, okay? But when you talk in normal, everyday stuff, it's impossible to separate these two. They will bleed into each other. They will. A normal conversation, it's impossible. It's impossible for me to tell you, you know what? Boy, I was really groggy when I woke up this morning and I opened the dishwasher and I found this burnt. I found this wheel, but it was burnt up. I was feeling groggy, imperfecto, okay? I got up It's an event. That'll be preterito. I opened the dishwasher. That's an event. It's preterito. I found, that's preterito because it happened. And now this was completely melted down as a description. And that'll have to go in imperfecto. So eventually, not today, eventually, you're going to hear stories that will blend those two elements because it's impossible to avoid. It's impossible to avoid. Okay. Today, we're definitely isolating them, but that gives you kind of a taste of how it's impossible to avoid. Okay, bien? We are going to isolate it now. We are, because we have to isolate it a little bit now. We're going to take a look at our cues using just imperfecto. Exclusively imperfecto. So let's preview before we do the practice. Oops, perdón. I want to take my video down entirely there. Okay. We're going to take a look at just these verbs that we're really focusing on today. Okay. And these are the verbs that you get very comfortable with in Spanish early on. In the first 3-4 weeks of Spanish, we get comfortable with these verbs. And ir is the only outlier that is going to go into sometimes preterito, sometimes imperfecto a lot, but haber, ser, estar, tener, ir. And we'll do just a touch of ir because ir, to go, winds up being an event a lot. So sometimes that is going to flip into preterito in common everyday conversation. But haber in conversation is going to wind up being imperfecto in the past most of the time. Okay. Haber is the verb that we get hay from, right? En mi escritorio, on my desk, hay una taza de café. En mi escritorio hay un ratón. There's a mouse. See? Hay. They are right now, right? But había would be the past. There was, there were. Había. And había gets used way more than its preterite form, hubo. Hubo is events only, so it's not as frequent, but había is a lot. Había. And the nice thing is, that's the only conjugation you need. You don't need a plural, just like I doesn't need a plural. Yeah. Hay papeles en el escritorio. There are papers. Or hay una taza de café. There is a coffee mug. Okay. Bien. So había is always había, just like I is always I. Había. There was or there were. Okay. You are using this to describe things in the past. We're going to use a lot of this form for ser. Era, eras, or era. Éramos, erais, eran. Bien. We're not going to use these F words that are, the preterito. Okay. You will hear era way more than you will hear fui to use ser. And notice that oddly, here's where it gets even more mind-blowing. Ser uses fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fuiste, fueron for preterite, the event-oriented. Ir, very uncomfortably, uses the exact same verb in the past for preterite. Fui, fuiste, fue. How flippin' confusing is that? Ir and ser in the event-oriented past use the exact same verb. That is weird. It is uncomfortable, but just know that when you hear fui or fuiste or fue, most of the time it's somebody saying somebody went someplace, and it's an event. It's preterite. Even though ir and ser share the exact same verb in preterite, most of the time when you hear people yakking in a normal conversation and you hear fui or fuimos or fue, most of the time it's somebody went to a place. And you will know from the context. Believe it or not, it will be easy. So today we're focusing on the era, eras, era, éramos, eran, right? Today we're focusing on the estar, which estar winds up being very regular in imperfecto. If I'm describing somebody in the past and I'm using estar, or I'm describing a thing in the past and I'm using estar, it'll be a very regular conjugation. Estaba, estabas, estaba, estábamos, estaban. Muy regular. And if we use tener, tener in imperfecto is very regular, right? No stem changes, no oddball stuff. It's straight out ia, 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 because tener is an ER verb. It uses ia endings. And there's no change in that ten, ten part of the stem. Tenía, tenías, tenía, teníamos, tenían. Boom. You will not hear these past tense forms of tener, these tuve. You will not hear the preterite forms as often as you hear these. You will hear these tenía forms of tener way more frequently. This imperfecto tense for tener is way more common for everyday speech because it just is. You know, we have all those tener idioms that say somebody was hungry, was sleepy. We want, those are all descriptions of how somebody felt. So if you're talking about them in the past, they're going to use tener. If you're talking about how old somebody was, that is description in the past. It's tener. It's going to use imperfecto. Bien? Okay. A ver. Well, we got a small group. I think I'm not going to break people out into breakout rooms to do our we're going to seg to our pre-made up questions now. So you'll want to have that piece of paper or that file up. And I think I'm not going to put us into smaller groups because we're a smaller group today. I'm just going to do this with everybody together. Okay. We're going to start with, vamos a empezar con tener. Here were the questions that you had last week. Did you have a pet? What was his name? What was the first car like that you ever had? What food did you have? Here are the new tener questions for today. It says next week, but now it's next week. Okay. Bien. And oops, let me take it off of share because I want to be able to see you guys and I need to flip something with my screens in order to do that, I think. Bien. Let's go back to this again. Okay. A ver. Oh, darn. Still can't see you guys. All right. I can't see you if you're raising a hand. So shout out a question if you have it. Let's take a look at these questions. ¿Cuántas personas tenía tu familia? Tu familia. How many people did your family have? How many people were in your family?
Tenía, oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
Trish.
Tenía 5 personas en mi familia.
Exacto. Exacto. Bien. ¿Qué más?
Tenía 4 personas.
Okay.
Tenía 4 personas en mi familia.
Sí, sí, sí. Exacto. Exacto. Muy bien. Okay. Vale. That's an easy one. You can see we want to start off with easy ones. ¿Cuántos? Sí.
Can you say, could I have said teníamos? We?
Teníamos, sí. Teníamos, you could say, teníamos 4 personas en nuestra familia. We had X number of people in our family. Yeah, we had. Teníamos.
Teníamos.
Perfecto, sí. Could somebody answer that question that way? Absolutamente. Sí, sí, sí.
Thank you.
Sí, cierto. Ok. Vale. ¿Cuántos años tenías al empezar tu primer empleo. How many years did you have literally? So how old were you when starting your first job? ¿Cuántos años tenías al empezar tu primer empleo?
Tenía 21 años cuando empezaba mi primer trabajo.
Yeah, okay. And actually, well, yeah, it'll probably be cuando empecé, when I started, but let's leave off the empezar. Al empezar, upon starting, al empezar, see? Okay, we're not going to conjugate the empezar part yet, but your tener part was right. Cuando tenía 21 años, cuando tenía 21 años, ¿sí? Yo tenía 16 años al empezar mi primer trabajo. Tenía 16 años. Mi primer trabajo era de tiempo parcial. It was a part-time, sí. Tenía 16 años. Tenía 16 años. ¿Ok? ¿Bien?
So, I'm still confused. So you're doing it like cuando tenía, you mentioned that, because I'm trying to do it like tenía 23 cuando empezar mi primer empleo.
Okay.
So is that, so
let me show you a couple of those. Tenía, booted me out of my keyboard. Tenía 21 años al empezar mi primer empleo. Now I had to wiggle that around a little bit, okay? Here are other ways you may hear people express that same idea. The important thing I want you to focus on is this part here, supplying that number information and using tener. That's all I wanted you to focus on. Tenía 21 años al empezar. But somebody could answer that same question, phrasing it a little bit differently. Okay. Tenía 21 años cuando empecé, and see, you don't know how to use that yet. When I started, and now I'm talking about something that happened. And you don't know how to do that, empecé. Cuando empecé mi primer trabajo, okay? Mi primer empleo. So I did not ask you to insert a cuando. Notice there's no cuando in that question.
Okay.
Okay. I was trying to rephrase it to make it easier. Somebody could also answer that same question with cuando empecé mi primer empleo, tenía 21 años. When I started my first job, but see, now you got to know, and you got to know how to use that preterite that you don't know how to use yet. So
okay.
These are other ways somebody can legitimately, correctly answer that same question. This reduces it to, I got no cuando in there, right? I just plug this same part in to the answer. But what I want you to focus on is when I was, to say Joe, using tenía and supplying that number.
Okay.
Whatever that number might be, right? 16, 20, 22, 21 años, lo que sea, whatever it may be. Make sense? Sí?
Sí, gracias.
De nada. Okay. Yeah, and
As
no,
an
that
aside in that question, what's the distinction between empleo and trabajo?
empleo and trabajo, not a lot. And they are synonyms. Empleo empleo is maybe a little more formal word, like saying my first position, you know, empleo and trabajo are pretty interchangeable. See? Bien? Okay. Let's move on to estar. Here are the forms that you needed to know. Estaba, estabas, estaba, estábamos, estaban. We're skipping the vosotros from estabais. Okay. Here are the questions we did last week. ¿Dónde estaba tu universidad? ¿Por qué estabas muy preocupado? ¿Dónde estabas para tus vacaciones? But here are the new ones here. We're going to take a look at. ¿Qué ciudad grande estaba cerca de tu pueblo natal? Pueblo natal means town where you were born. Yeah, hometown is pueblo natal. ¿Qué ciudad grande estaba cerca de tu pueblo natal? I'm going to start with my example first, okay? Lansing, Michigan. ¿Sí? Estaba cerca de mi pueblo natal. Lansing, Michigan, estaba cerca de mi pueblo natal. Bien? Okay. Ustedes, you guys.
Mi pueblo natal estaba grande. Es Chicago. Is
Oh,
the S
okay.
correct?
Okay. We're not going to have the grande in there.
No grande.
Okay. We're just going to take Chicago.
Okay.
Chicago estaba cerca. Okay. Here's how I explain that. This phrase disappears entirely when you give your answer.
Okay.
Because whatever is the big city, that slots into that Ciudad Grande. And Ciudad Grande disappears.
Sí.
Okay, so when I answered, it's Lansing, Michigan. Estaba cerca de mi pueblo. Lansing was near my hometown.
So Chicago estaba mi pueblo grande.
Estaba cerca de mi pueblo natal. Let me type out how that will sound. Chicago estaba cerca de mi pueblo natal. Bien?
Pero Chicago es mi. Estaba.
Okay. Bien. So, bueno, entonces, Chicago era mi pueblo. Era mi pueblo natal. If the city proper is it, well, that is the big city. See, Chicago era mi pueblo natal.
Which is why I answered it the other. So it's era, not S. Era.
And now why is that era and not estaba? Because if that were in present, you would say en presente, Chicago es mi pueblo natal. Chicago is my hometown. But I need to use ser for that.
My original way of saying it was mi pueblo natal estaba grande, es Chicago.
Okay, still era.
Era.
Mi pueblo natal era Chicago.
Era Chicago, okay.
Okay, I can't use estar for that.
Cannot.
And this kind of problem is kind of common, right? Because now you are thinking not only about using a brand new conjugation, but you're thinking about that ser estar thing. Uh-oh. Ser estar being two different verbs becomes very, very hard for us once we learn past tense, because you're thinking new conjugation, oh, ser or estar. You're combining two hard concepts.
Right.
Yeah, into talking. So it is appropriate to completely say, oh, I can't even use that verb anymore. I have to flip into ser in imperfecto. Because if I'm saying Chicago is my hometown, I can't use estar.
Yeah.
I need to use ser, and ser in imperfecto becomes this, era.
Sí,
Does that make sense? Sí?
sí, 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 sí.
Lógico?
I have the same problem. Mi pueblo natal era Nueva York.
Perfecto. Now, while this is difficult, it kind of shows you that there are all kinds of factors that start to affect how your speech, has to go.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, not as easy as it seems, is it? Okay. Does somebody have a different thing where they are actually going to use estaba cerca, was nearby?
I can.
Okay.
Milwaukee estaba cerca de pueblo natal.
Okay. Okay. So, for example, if I were talking about my husband, it would be Des Moines. Des Moines estaba cerca de su pueblo natal. Des Moines was near his hometown. Des Moines, a bigger city, see? Des Moines estaba cerca de su pueblo natal. Bien? Okay. For example, because I do live in a small town, I would have to say about my kids, talking about my kids, that Scottsdale estaba cerca de su pueblo natal. Okay. If I were talking about, ¿quién? Mi mejor amiga, my best friend, mi mejor amiga. I would have to say Milwaukee, Wisconsin, estaba cerca de su pueblo natal. Milwaukee was near her hometown. Bien?
Sí.
Is there another example anybody wants to plug in for that one? Sí o no? Okay. Okay. Now let's take a look at this question. ¿En qué ciudad estaba tu primera casa o tu primer apartamento? ¿Sí? What city? In what city? Yeah. In what city was your first house or your first apartment? And I should really kind of amend this to primer apartamento. Yeah. Wherever you first worked. This has to be estaba because what city was it in? You're describing where it used to be. That is a description. Yeah. Where your first apartment or your first house was is not an event. It didn't happen and then it was over. It was there for, I don't know, a long time. That's just description. So it's got to be estaba. See? Okay.
So estaba in this case is like if you mention the city, so estaba en.
Well, it's actually, yeah, estaba en. Right. No matter what it is, it's got to be estaba en. It was in. It was in, and then you name the city. Okay. Mi primer apartamento estaba en. Mi primer apartamento estaba en Vernon Hills, Illinois. Mi primer apartamento estaba en Vernon Hills, Illinois.
Gosh.
Okay.
Good job.
Ustedes, you guys, your turn.
So if I say like mi primero or mi primera? Mi
It
primero.
Mi primera
primero apartamento.
But mi primera casa. It depends on if it was house or apartment.
Okay, so if I say apartamento, then it's mi primero apartamento estaba en Jakarta, Indonesia.
Exacto. Exacto. Muy bien.
Mi primer apartamento estaba en Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Bien. Okay. Vale. Más. More.
Mi primer apartamento estaba en Dayton, Ohio.
Bien. Perfecto.
Mi primer apartamento y primera casa estaban en Houston.
Perfecto. Muy bien. Muy bien. Excelente. Excelente. Okay. ¿Alguien más o no? That's it. Sí.
I can go.
Okay.
Mi primero apartamento estaba en Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Exacto. Excelente. Excelente. Muy bien. Bien. Okay. A ver. ¿Alguna pregunta? Any little question before we move on or no?
No.
Is it start? So what I want you to get used to is just a pattern, and we're focusing just on imperfecto. We're not focusing on events at all. No, because events is that harder one to conjugate, right? So, okay, bien. Let's move on to ser. We're going to move on to ser, and ser is going to have, here we did not have a previous practice. So these are all new. Ser turns into, these are not endings. This is a whole verb. Yeah, it's era, eras, era, and yo and él, usted share the same one, right? In imperfecto always. Éramos, eran. We're skipping the erais, the vosotros form. Okay, so you're going to have to give a descriptive word, something that fills in the idea of como, how. What was somebody like? ¿Cómo era tu mamá cuando eras niño? ¿Cómo era tu mamá cuando eras niña? Mi mamá era muy paciente cuando era niña. Mi mamá era paciente. She was patient.
If I
I
see
said-
this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I couldn't figure out how to use ser in the verb. So I said, ella estaba muy ocupada con 5 niños.
Okay. Bien. Hiciste bien. You did well. Yes.
Okay.
Because ocupada is, a changeable state. Estaba ocupada es correcto. Sí.
Okay.
Estaba muy ocupado con 5
Niños.
hijos. Sí. Perfecto. Okay, bien.
Okay.
About mi mamá era una ama de casa.
Era ama de casa. She was a housewife. Bien.
I said, ella era bonita, muy educada, pero muy estricta
Bien.
cuando era niña.
Bien. Excelente. Sí. Descripción. Fantástico. Algo más. Something more.
Mi mamá era muy joven.
Era muy joven. She was a young mom.
Muy joven.
Bien.
Mi mamá era muy divertida cuando era una niña.
She was a lot of fun. Exacto. Era divertida. Perfecto. ¿Algo más o no? Okay. Bien.
Harry, what was the word for a housewife? What do you say that?
Housewife. Oops.
What do you say that, Carrie?
Ama de
It's 3
casa?
words. It's 3 words. Ama de casa.
Oh,
Ama de casa is kind of like master of the house, which is what the housewife is. How, okay, yeah, right. Ama de casa is the one who oversees the house. That's what it means. Yeah, ama de casa. Ama de casa. Housewife is not one word in Spanish. It is 3. Ama de casa.
Sounds a lot better than housewife.
Sí, el ama de casa hace muchas cosas. Housewife does a lot of things. Ok, la segunda pregunta. ¿Cómo era la ciudad donde naciste? Where you were born. Where you were born. Uh-oh, that one is a nasty past tense. And I can't avoid that because when you were born, that's an event. It was over and done with at some point, right? Being born is an event, guys. Nacer almost always, usually most of the time, gets put into preterito. So just leave that out. ¿Cómo era la ciudad? What was the city like? That's what our focus is. And we really can leave that part out when you answer it. Because when you talk to somebody, if somebody says, hey, city where you were born, what was it like? You don't look at them and say, the city where I was born. No, you just say it was big, it was small, it was pretty. Ooh, it was an ugly industrial town. Whatever it was, right? Right. But when we answer that question, we leave off that where I was born part when we answer, right? Most of the time. Yeah, okay. So leave that where I was born part out. Here's what we're focusing on. ¿Cómo era la ciudad? Describe the city. ¿Sí? La ciudad era industrial. Era industrial. It was an industrial place para mí. ¿Ok? Ustedes.
La ciudad era muy grande.
Era muy grande. It was really big. Bien. ¿Qué más?
Mi ciudad era muy pequeño.
Mi ciudad era muy pequeña. Mi ciudad era muy pequeña. My town was small.
La ciudad era muy hermosa.
Otra vez.
Hermosa.
Hermosa. La ciudad era hermosa. It was beautiful. Bien. Era bonita. It was pretty. Era fea. It was ugly. Lo que sea. Bien. Okay. Era grande. Era pequeña. Whatever it was. Okay. Bien. Otro ejemplo. Another example. ¿Sí o no?
No. I will say, la ciudad era muy diferente.
Diferente. Okay. Sí.
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 Diferente.
Sí. Sí. Oh, yeah. It was very different. Now it isn't like that anymore. Era muy diferente. Wow. It used to be different. And notice, era muy diferente. It was different. It used to be different. Maybe now it has grown. Maybe now it has shrunk. Yeah. So yeah, it used to be. Okay. Bien. Okay. ¿Cómo eran tus compañeros de trabajo en tu primer empleo? ¿Cómo eran tus compañeros de trabajo? How were your workmates? How were the people you used to work with? What were they like in your first job? And notice I use trabajo and empleo mainly just so I don't keep repeating the same word, trabajo, 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 right? Just like in English, we mix things up. We'll say, how were your work, your coworkers in your first job? Okay, so I'm mixing up trabajo and empleo there. ¿Cómo eran tus compañeros de trabajo? Here's what we're focusing on. What were your colleagues like? Coworkers.
What do you call that in how do you say it in Spanish? It's like, it's like, it's okay, not like comme ci comme ça in French, like comme ci comme ça. So what do you call that in Spanish?
Okay, so when you're neither very excited about nor, you don't
Okay,
dislike
they're
them.
not nasty. They're not,
Normales, normales.
normales. Okay,
Yeah, normales, regulares.
regulares. Okay.
Sí.
Gracias.
Ni muy simpáticos, ni muy antipáticos. Neither super nice nor unpleasant.
Ni simpático.
Ni antipáticos, ni simpáticos. Neither mean nor nice, kind of somewhere in the middle. See?
Okay, gracias.
Lo
Gracias.
usual, the usual thing. See? Okay.
So eran lo usual.
Eran regulares, eran normales.
Okay.
Eran normales. I would tend towards that. Eran normales. See? Yeah. Okay.
Sí,
¿Algo
gracias.
más?
Eran divertidos.
Eran divertidos. They were a fun bunch. Eran muy divertidos. They were a lot of fun. Bien.
Mis
Los
compañeros de
Oh, sorry.
trabajo eran útiles.
Okay. Maybe mis compañeros eran mayores. They were older people. Eran jóvenes. They were younger people, right?
Mis compañeros eran ayudante.
Sí, helpful.
Sí.
I would say in that case, amables, kind, because kind people help you out.
That's
You
what I
know.
tried saying, útil.
Útiles, useful. Yeah. Momentito. Yeah. Útiles would mean useful. Yeah. But we use that more for things. Like a thing that is useful, like a tool or a machine. Útil does mean useful.
That's what the Google Translate gave me.
Yeah,
I was looking for helpful.
Yeah, that's kind of a troublesome thing to servicial, amables, muy simpáticos, perdón, muy simpáticos, nice people, kind people, the type that, personas que me ayudaran, que me ayudaban, people who helped me a lot, but that's getting kind of complicated. You want to usually, you want to concentrate it down to descriptive words. Amables is great. Simpáticos, nice. Divertidos, just flat out fun.
Atento, is that atento? Is that what
atentos, sí. Atentos, sí.
Agradables.
Agradables, sí, perfecto. Agradables, sí. Serious people. Yeah, if they're like all business types, muy serios, tipos muy serios. Yeah, really serious type people. Okay, bien. ¿A qué hora era cuando te levantaste? And now I'm talking about when you got up. And so I supplied you with what you need in the answer, because this needs to be in the past you don't know. I got up. Now it's an event. We're not talking about a habit now. Anytime you talk about telling the time in the past, it has to be imperfecto, which seems like a contradiction, but it's kind of, I guess, because it's a description. Okay. I'm going to give you my example. Eran las 4:30. Cuando me levanté, it was 4:30. Guy. Okay. I hope you have a different time than what I have. Eran las 4:30 cuando me levanté. Ustedes, you guys.
Why did you use eran rather than era?
Because telling time. Oh, in present, it would be son las 4:30. It's 4:30, but that's if it's the time right now, currently. Yeah. So whenever I use time in the past and I say it was 4:30, I've, perdón, I've got a typo here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a typo. It's going to have to be this one for telling time unless it's the 1 o'clock hour. And I'm sorry if I didn't have the end there, it was a fat finger problem. And I was typo on my part. Eran, yeah. Son las 4:30. It's 4:30 right now. Well, now that's not accurate because I'm talking in the past. It was 4:30 becomes eran las 4:30. It's eran is the past of son.
Oh.
Make sense?
Sí.
Right? And the only time I'm going to use era is going to be for the 1 o'clock hour. And I hope you're not waking up at 1 o'clock. Okay, but you could be. Okay. Somebody else give me a different time for what you see in the blue there. Eran las 4:30.
I
Eran a
said,
las 5. Eran a las 5 en la media. A 5:30 en la mañana.
Okay.
Cuando me levanté.
Okay. Bien. Más ideas, more ideas.
I said, no sé, era la mañana.
Era la mañana. It was morning. Bien. Sí. Okay. Sí. Exacto. Algo diferente, something different.
No.
No, okay. Let's look at haber. Haber always is haber. Había. Just like I is always I. In presente, había will always be the same all the time because it doesn't get a plural form. Okay. Haber, when it's used in this sense, because there are other ways we use haber, but when it's used in this sense, it's what we call the impersonal verb. To say there is a box in the room, or wow, there are pens over there. It's what we call an impersonal verb. We're just talking about the existence of a bunch of things or the existence of one thing. Okay, so that's why I is always I, and to flip it into the past when we describe, we just flip it into había. So, entonces, sí, cuando había mucho tráfico. ¿Cuándo? When was there a lot of traffic? You might say a day, you might say a time. Keep it simple.
Había mucho tráfico entre las 5 y las 7 todas las tardes.
Okay. Había, okay, sí, muy lógico. Había mucho tráfico between, right?
Yes.
Entre las 5 y las 7, por ejemplo, ¿sí? Between 5 and 7. You're talking rush hour, right? So, había mucho tráfico. There was a lot of traffic entre las 5 y las 7. And you might throw in de la tarde. You might, or you might not. You might say, well, somebody knows I'm talking PM and leave off the de la tarde. Bien. Bien. Algo diferente, something different?
Saying había mucho tráfico cuando la gente terminaba de trabajar.
Cuando la gente
Terminaba de
okay.
trabajar.
Okay, acaba con el trabajo. El trabajo. Let's make it easier. What you
So
really mean is
what I'm
when
saying is
people,
like it's when they finish working. When
yes.
people finish working.
Okay, so what we really mean is that they left work to go home, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Cuando la gente salía del trabajo.
Oh.
That's probably a little more what we really mean when people left work, right?
Sí.
When they left work, and that's salir. Yeah.
Cuando la gente salía, you said?
Cuando la gente salía del trabajo, when people left work.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because that's why the roads got clogged. They left work, right? Okay. You might be more general and say, había mucho tráfico. Los lunes hasta los viernes. Monday through Friday. Sí. Exacto. You might keep it very, very simple. Había mucho tráfico.
Ayer.
Even ayer, even just ayer, yesterday, or maybe inserting the idea por la mañana,
Sí.
in the morning. Yeah.
About había mucho tráfico cuando había un partido de béisbol.
Muy bien. Cuando había un partido de béisbol. Maybe you live near where they have the spring training, right? Cuando había un partido de béisbol. Oh, when there was a baseball game, there would be a lot of traffic. Muy lógico. Those are all logical ways you could answer that same question. See? Okay.
Pregunta.
Sí, dime.
Por la mañana. Where does por come from? Había mucho tráfico por la mañana.
It just is.
And you translate it as?
In the morning. You could say, some people prefer to say instead of por, en la mañana.
En la mañana. That's what
Some people do. Por la mañana is one of those phrases you just need to learn as a chunk. Por la mañana means in the morning. If I don't tag it on to a clock time, this is a very standard way of somebody saying in the morning.
Por la tarde, por la noche.
Exacto. Mi esposo siempre camina por la noche durante el verano. Mi esposo siempre camina por la noche, at night. And look, in English, we switch from in the morning to at night. Do we say in the night that much?
No.
Why do we say, how do you know when to say at night, but in the morning? You just know. That's how you just know. Por la mañana. Por la mañana. And you can plug in por la tarde, por la noche. And this means something is happening at that time of day. Yeah. Okay. It's a general time of day, not a specific time of day, right?
Okay.
It could be a many hour span. In that hour span, we call la mañana. Okay. ¿Qué juguetes había en tu habitación de niño? In your bedroom as a kid. ¿Qué juguetes había? So what we're focusing on is the ¿qué juguetes había? We're going to take juguetes out and we'll probably put something more specific in. And we'll start off with había. There were. Había Legos en mi habitación. Había Legos en mi habitación. Okay. ¿Qué más? What else might you have said?
Había muñecas.
Muñecas. Había muñecas en mi habitación. There were dolls in, yeah. Había muñecas en mi habitación.
Había tarjetas de béisbol.
Ah, tarjetas de béisbol. Tarjetas de béisbol, sí. Muy normal. Baseball cards, tarjetas de béisbol, sí. Exacto. Ok. Había animales de peluche. ¿Qué son animales de peluche? Animales de peluche are stuffed animals. Yeah, stuffed animals. Había animales de peluche. De peluche just is a descriptive word. It says they're made out of fluffy stuff. De peluche means they're fuzzy and stuffed. Okay, de peluche. Okay. Bien. Okay. ¿Qué tipo de recreo? We're going to finish up with this one because we're getting up close to our witching hour here. ¿Qué tipo de recreo había en tu universidad? What kind of recreo means pastime, stuff to do for fun? ¿Qué tipo de recreo había? What kind of recreation was there at your university?
Había muchos deportes intramuros.
Okay. Había muchos deportes intramurales. Sí. Había muchos deportes. There were lots of sports. Sí. Había something different.
Había fiestas.
Había fiestas. Sí, fiestas. There were parties. Excelente.
Party animal, Diane.
Okay. Sí. Eso es. Okay. Pero muy, sí, había muchos.
What do you say that in Spanish? Party animals.
Borrachones, yeah, borrachones, sí, yeah.
I'll ask for you, Diane.
Yeah. Okay.
Bailar, how would you say dances? Bailar, but that's
Yeah.
Bailes.
bailes.
B-I-I-L-E-S, bailes.
Bailes.
Yeah, bailes. Okay.
Oh, look
Okay.
at that.
You got kind of a good feel for, and we were just isolating that little thing. Do you want more questions like that to prep for next week? They're all descriptive, all imperfecto. Yes, see?
Sure.
Okay. And they're going to be everyday stuff, no rocket science. Bien. Okay. We did I give you the Disneyland video last week to watch?
Yeah.
I did, but we didn't get time to actually walk through it. We'll maybe do a walkthrough to see if, watch it again next week to see if you have any questions. I'm going to give you yet a different past tense story. And I think it's going to be so that you can hear, and it's going to have an English translation below, the Spanish above, so that you start to see the two tenses right together in that confusing way. And just know when you see a verb that looks like, I don't know what that verb is, look for the translation, hit the pause button and look for the translation below. Okay. But it'll show you how it's kind of impossible to tell a story without having those two past tenses. I want you to start to get used to that. So I'll give you a new story. Rewatch the Disneyland thing. We didn't get time to get into that, but I want to step through and show you why she used maybe one tense, the imperfecto, or the other imperfecto, why those two were there. And I'll give you some new questions for next week. ¿Está bien? Sounds good? Perfecto. And just keep those little slides about the common verbs haber in había form, right? The ser going into era, the estar going into estaba, the tener going into tenía, and we'll reuse those, but with different ideas to talk and use them more in the past for next week. Bien?
Sí.
Todo bien, perfecto. So you'll have new questions and you'll have the old story to look at once more, and a new story, which is going to be more of a like a well, it's definitely a fairy tale kind of story. Okay. Bien.
Bien.
Okay, gracias.
Excelente. Que tengan buena semana. Have a really good week. Bien. Sí.
Okay, gracias.